Hello and welcome to the folks who are showing up here at the top of the hour. We are going to give everybody just a few more minutes to filter in. But welcome to Wallarm's webinar on APIs in an AI world. This will be a leadership conversation on the API risk that is currently being driven by the rapid AI adoption that we're seeing across industries. While we're waiting for folks to come in, I would love to just invite folks to join in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. It's always really cool to see where across the world folks are attending. Usually open these with good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining. So go ahead and let us know in the chat there. Uh, wow, we're seeing everywhere from Atlanta, Georgia. Got Oslo coming on the line. Another a fellow Oregonian coming in from Salem. New York State in the USA. Oh, and the Catskills. Catskills are beautiful. And a Tucson, Arizona. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining. As we're coming up to a couple minutes past the hour, I'll go ahead and get us started. My name's Celeste Kinswood, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Wallarm. And I am joined today by two fantastic security experts. AJ DeBoli is our field CISO from Oracle. And she has a fantastic background that includes law and frontline incident response. And now she's bringing a practical perspective to how organizations are handling security and risk. I'm also joined by Alan Coopernall, Director of Technology for Assurance Dimensions, with a deep background in the financial sector, as well as 16 years experience in cybersecurity generally. His focus, I think, now is on infrastructure and network operations. AJ, Alan, welcome. Please feel free to give yourself a quick intro to the folks on the call.
Sure. Thank you, Celeste. Hi, everyone. I'm AJ. Celeste gave a great intro, so I don't have much to add to that, but thank you for having me here today. Over to you, Alan.
Yeah, I mean the same. I mean, I've been doing security for 16 years. Infrastructure and network operations before that, and now I do leadership roles and try to do thought leadership around where we are and where we need to be in this new security focused world.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for joining. We're going to talk today a lot about AI security and the connection that it has to API security. And I think that when we think about AI, we often think about the models that are running, the LLMs. We think about maybe the cloud infrastructure, or the physical infrastructure, the data centers. But so often what we overlook is the fact that every AI system is really running on APIs. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how folks on the call the business leaders and practitioners on the call can work across their organization to help secure their API security, their API layer. Since if you're not securing those APIs, you really can't consider your AI secure as well. And we're going to do that today just in a very conversational style. I'll share a few slides with some questions, some stats. But overall, there's no presentation, there's no product demo. This is just an opportunity for folks on the call to definitely ask questions in the chat. Feel free to submit to the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom. We'll try to get some of those questions live on the call. But we'll just dive in with I think a very conversational approach. And the first question that I wanted to, speak to with you, AJ and Alan, is the attack surface expansion that we're seeing. So we're looking at how AI agents, how MCP servers, how the implementation of automated workflows is expanding the attack surface, broadly, but very specifically the API attack surface. So I don't know if either of you wanted to grab that question first, but let's start out there.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can go ahead. I mean, it's one of those things where I mean, as we see more AI constructs, I mean, we've got Claude, we've got, Chat GPT. I mean, we've got, there's just, I mean, Copilot. I mean, you can go on and on I mean, what we have and what we can do. I mean, and when you bring all those in, I mean, I think that you get into a situation where, I mean, people will bring some of these LLMs to the market. And I mean, they may not be as mature as, I mean, you would see like maybe like a OpenAI or a Chat GPT. I mean, people think of like the big three or four, I mean, but they get into some of these other ones that are um, part and parcel to maybe like a line of business app that they're using or something like that. I mean, you see it with like a Quicken, or you see it with, I mean, I'm just going into my industry with like CCH and, I mean, financial applications. They'll partner with, I mean, an LLM or like a chat bot model. And, I mean, it may not be as polished. I mean, so then you have issues, I mean, like, I mean, you can get into like credential theft. You can get into, I mean, arbitrary code execution because it's just it's not as mature as some of these other ones are. I mean, which give you a lot of vectors for, I mean, risk.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan. AJ, anything to add there in terms of API attack surface and the way it's being reshaped and expanded by AI?
Absolutely. It used to take a while for a person to develop an application and set up APIs for an intentional purpose. And now with these AI capabilities, they can do that autonomously. So it's very easy to see how the AI sprawl and the content sprawl can increase exponentially. But there's another way I like to think about it because I like to think as these attack surfaces change and they transform, how does my way of thinking need to transform? And I think of it in two ways. There's the concept of meaning. We're not just defending endpoints anymore. We're gonna have to try to defend intent. MCP and agentic systems, they shift the surface from parameters and authorization instructions to context and what the system, for lack of a better term, thinks it's supposed to do. And that's a much fuzzier problem. And it creates room for creative attacks that slip past structured defenses. So we might have to think about how we are going to approach those. And then there's this trust boundaries. The risk isn't just the API call, it's everything in the chain. We have proxies and token exchanges, callbacks, middleware, all kinds of stuff. And every one of those hops is a chance for identity to break down or trust to be misapplied. So I'd say one of the hardest agents, the issues here is that agents blur intent. A call can be valid, it can be authenticated, and it can still do bad stuff. And that's a very different security model.
Definitely. I think one of the things that you both spoke to here is the depth of the attack surface, that it's not just the breadth, it's also the depth. And I think that speaks a lot to the issue of visibility. So I'm going to move us into a poll question here. We wanted to make sure this webinar was really, interactive. And so we'd love to know how confident you or your team feels in the visibility that you have into APIs that are created by using used by AI in your organization. We have a range here from very confident all the way down to not confident at all. I'd like to think this is a safe space, fairly anonymous out there. So feel free to answer honestly, but just let us know. Is this a place where you think you have really strong visibility, or is this somewhere where there's maybe an acknowledged blind spot for your organization? Give folks just a few minutes to get in responses there. As we wait for those responses, AJ, is this, you talked about the depth here. Is this something where you think visibility, is that a first step that folks need to be taking? How does this visibility piece play into understanding overall?
That's a great question. Thank you. I see it could be taken in one of two ways. There could be a step zero, where you think about
Mhm.
what do I need visibility into now that I didn't need to have visibility into before, either because the attack surface has become much greater and or because there needs to be new ways of thinking and maybe perhaps new dynamic methods and models to enjoy that visibility because of the autonomy of the system. So I guess the two ways to do it is think about that before you implement the visibility, or you want to address the knowns. So maybe you implement the visibility, and then from there you find blind spots kind of on that like attack surface geometric plane, and you can
Mm.
concurrently think about what aren't we looking for within the confines of this tool set that we're learning about as these systems mature and we build more capabilities as defenders, but also as clever attackers find really cool new ways to manipulate these systems, and now we need visibility into those aspects.
Absolutely. Well, we do have the results from that poll in, and our winner, I suppose you'd say here, is not very confident. 41% of folks said that visibility is limited for them. So, definitely, I think to see the honesty on the call, but also, would love to continue to chat about how we can close those gaps. And thank you, AJ, for joining in on that. One of the things that I think is so important when we think about visibility is not just what are we missing, but how crucial, how critical is what we're missing. And this is another place, these are some stats that come from Wallarm's recent threat stat report, our 2026 version of the API threat stats. And something that we saw this year that I thought was very interesting is that 36% of AI vulnerabilities involve APIs, but they are also exploited at a much higher rate. So we see that this 43% of the vulnerabilities that were actually exploited were API related. So we know this is both a very fast growing attack surface and also one that's being very deeply exploited. Any thoughts, on those stats?
Yeah, I can totally understand that, and I get where everybody's coming from with the poll question. We have, all of these different ways that people can exploit, services and, solutions moving forward. You're seeing like ransomware as a service. You're seeing bad actors using AI in order to corrupt or, get some kind of persistence into other people's AI platforms. And without doing, and I may be getting a little ahead of myself here, but without making sure that you have the right guardrails around your technology to begin with, you're already a step behind. There could be some opportunities that you could have a 0 day or something like that as far as some of these API calls that these LLMs use. And if you're not on top of that, or um, if you don't have the right controls around, your API or your AI security in general, then you're part of the 36 and 43.
Yeah, I think you make a really excellent point. And it's something that I've seen across my career in security is that anytime there's a new technological revolution, whether that's AI now, it's the big data, that we had 5, 10 years ago, that these are things that show up on both sides of the security equation, right? That attackers are leveraging them, at a similar, even higher rate than security teams are able to leverage them. So I think we're seeing that again with AI, and it's really interesting. We've talked a little bit about the attack surface, how it's morphing, how it's changing, and would love to understand, maybe from you, AJ, how do you think that this is changing API security, as we have this strong implementation of AI?
Sure. I would say the thing that changes the most is how much of it is out there and how complex it becomes.
Mm.
On the last slide for a moment, we were talking a little bit about that interplay between defenders and attackers. And forgive my liberal arts background here for a second, but there's a beauty in that dance. And as these technologies become more and more complex and they're able to do more, a lot of us might just take those capabilities for granted. You see a system and you might not care how it works as long as it does work. But when it doesn't work anymore, then suddenly we care and we want to learn about the individual parts and how they fit together, and we become curious. And ultimately, the people who are largely responsible for giving us those conversations and opportunities are attackers who tinker with these systems and break them. So we all come together and have discussions about what we can do better and how we can understand them better. But I would say, fundamentally, unfortunately, none of the fundamentals have changed. It's still the name of the game really is all security hygiene, doing the basics very well. But what AI changes about doing the basics really well is now you don't have an excuse. If you if you don't have your ducks in a row, these AI attack pathways, they're fast, they're good, they execute very well. You can't have failures in the dark anymore because what you're mishandling in your programs, it's going to come to light. So I'd say it's a great opportunity to just take a tactical pause and say, what do we do well? What don't we do well? What's on our risk register and our risk assessment findings that maybe we have a new story so that we can communicate to management what sorts of resources we need to rise to this occasion. So yeah, I'd say now is the time to take a look at those things, to advocate for your teams, to get those capabilities, to protect your companies, because ultimately you want to innovate, you want to grow, you want to increase your profits, or if you're a nonprofit, increase the amount of outcomes you can provide to beneficiaries. And you can't do that if you're busy dealing with an attack.
Yeah, I think you're previewing there that we'll definitely dive into some of the leadership pieces around what questions we should ask a little later on. So, thanks very much for sharing that. Alan, anything to add there?
But yeah, I mean, I think that it also highlights the real opportunity that we have here. I mean, I know that there's a lot of speaking around, I mean, secure coding and stuff like that, and making sure that security is brought to the table in the beginning of projects. And I
Mhm.
mean, just with, I mean, API and AI, security moving forward. I mean, this is, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, this is bottom level basement stuff where, I mean, we need to make sure that security, your security team is fully engaged. I mean, when your development team is starting some of these projects, I mean, because if we wait weeks or we wait until we get further along in the development process, I mean, then I mean, most of the time you have to go backwards. I mean, it's one of those things where I mean, if you don't bring security in the beginning, then you're going to go backwards in the end, and you're going to spend more time, money, effort, and
Mm.
resources in order to do the thing that you should have just done in the beginning. I mean, and that's I think that that's really fundamental around all this stuff is that I mean, yes, you can have good security hygiene. Yes, your development team can do great work, but if they're not working together in order to come to a common solution, then it's broken from the start.
Thank you. Fantastic from answers from both of you there. We'll dive just straight into our next question, which was, as AJ, you were starting to touch on, how would you explain this kind of AI-driven API risk to leadership teams within your organization in a simple way, in a practical way that's going to be really easy for them to access?
Sure. When I was an operational CISO, one of the biggest questions my CIO would say to me is, "I read about this terrifying attack in the news. What does that mean for us?" And looking back, I think I missed a few opportunities there in the sense that hindsight is 2020 because we had those risk assessments, we had those risk registers, we had those findings, but I never took the opportunity to do two things that I see now. One of them is to chain those risks and vulnerabilities together into an attack pathway. Because if you hand management this list of controls or things you got to do, and you're saying some things are critical and some things are not, on one hand, it's a bunch of stuff. And why are they going to care about this bunch of stuff? So you have to tell a story. So by weaving, saying how an attack pathway can string multiple vulnerabilities together, now you're looking at an enterprise program, not just a mixed bag of miscellaneous problems. So one is we have to connect these risks into attack pathways because they don't exist in a vacuum, and we shouldn't consider them in a vacuum. And then the other bridge we need to bring is between those headlines in our attack pathways strung together from our internal known vulnerabilities. How do you tell that story? So you can tell that story by chaining those vulnerabilities together and saying what could happen. And then in the news, you can see that it did. And you can talk about which vulnerabilities you have internally that make your environment like this environment where something bad happened, and turn those conversations where you're informing your leadership and helping them to feel a little bit better about their environment to also say, guess what? Now we have a great opportunity to learn from this external situation, take a look at our internal environment, take positive steps to decrease the likelihood. And what board doesn't love to hear that?
Yeah. I think you make such excellent points. And as a fellow liberal arts degree in undergrad, uh, I think that that idea of narrative and concrete example are so powerful, when speaking to leadership, because it helps to anchor this maybe abstract feeling risk in something that has a very clear and real story for the organization and is also tied to those examples that leaders can see externally. So I think those are fantastic points. Alan, if you had to sit down with your, let's say, C-suite folks, maybe some execs in your board tomorrow, and give a quick summary of API risk and how AI is driving that, what do you think you would say?
Well, I mean, yeah, I've had a couple of conversations around this, and you mean for me mostly, it's understanding, you mean what the C-suite or what your executive team actually wants to do, or what they want to get out of the services that you're trying to use here. I mean, and I think that helps you lessen the attack surface, because that means that there may be items, I mean, through API security or through like a CASB situation or something like that, where you can kind of close some of those doors. To AJ's point, I mean, if you don't know how, I mean, a potential attack can affect the applications, and it's not even just like an API thing with AI. I mean, that's just in general. I mean, if you don't know, I mean, what kind of risk that your applications are bringing to the table. I mean, especially with users who may not understand, or you may have some shadow IT kind of stuff where somebody, I mean, and that's a great thing for AI, right? Because we're seeing a bunch of that now. I mean, you can now, I mean, co-pilots built into Windows 11. I mean, it's all of those kind of things where, you mean, you've got this stuff right at their fingertips, and I mean, if you don't go through and show them the storyboard of, I mean, this is what you want to use, this is how we need to get there, and this is how we need to secure it in those points between, so that way we don't end up like a insert company name here who had a prompt injection issue or something like that. Then, I mean, I think that those are the kind of conversations that you have. But I also try to bring the real life situations into play when I'm talking to executives or C suites, because, I mean, sometimes those technical conversations can get lost on them, and they're just like, I have this thing, my people want to use it, just make it work, Alan. I mean, but bringing to the table, I mean, we can make it work, but this is what we need to do in order to make sure it's working successfully and efficiently, and that we have the telemetry that we need in order to make sure that if we do get into a situation, we can take care of it in a manner that is good for us, and, I mean, doesn't expose us for a lot of risk.
Thank you. Fantastic. Uh, this is another stat that I wanted to bring to both of you, which is something that I think of when I'm looking at the business leader or executive side of communication is prioritization, right? These are always folks who have too many things on their plate, and then they have too many plates, and then all of those plates are spinning in the air at the same time, right? So helping execs to understand priority is something that I think is so vital, so important. And this is, I think, one of those stats that can help folks do that, which is that when we look at the actual risk level of API vulnerabilities, that it's very, very high, that 67%, the vast majority of those fall into what our customers would qualify as a high or critical security risk. Of course, I think that's because, a new territory, is like catnip for attackers, right? They really are very excited to go after these types of vulnerabilities where there's a very high impact, where they can, have a very high impact attack for a very low effort. So wondering if that impact and effort equation is something that you guys have seen in relationship to AI and API vulnerabilities, and how you think that's impacting business risk.
I think it's not always well translated into business risk. And I think that it has to have a dollar value, and that dollar value has to be anchored in things that have happened.
Mhm.
We like to go back to that old school methodology of assigning value to assets. And that assumes that assets are going to be compromised in a particular fashion and on their own. I remember a attack a few years ago. I don't want to bring up any, security team's name because that could have been any of us. But basically, some teenagers made a phone call, did a great social engineering attack, and next thing you know, it's hundreds of millions of dollars of problems.
Yeah.
And I'm not confident that was ever communicated. I'm not confident that whatever vulnerabilities existed, they were tied to business risk in that order of magnitude. Because if somebody had said, "Hey, it is trivial to change your administrative security controls for administrative access," you can do it by using phishing via phone, and anybody can do it, and you could lose hundreds of millions of dollars. I think that any executive in their right mind would have said, all right, we got to change the phone call thing. So I think that we need to be a little bit more creative. I think we need to tie business risk to what could happen to what has happened. And then we need to be a little bit more intellectually flexible about how an attack could unfold and how multiple things chained together could result in not just one asset, could dozens or all of the assets, and then reflect those numbers, and then
Yeah.
reflect the cost to mitigate.
Yeah. I think that your discussion of assets and your discussion of the dollar value is so fascinating to me. I don't have the stat on the slides, but for any of our folks on the call who are familiar with Postman, fantastic organization that helps companies manage their APIs. They did a report again last year, and they again saw that the majority of companies, I think it was 60+% of companies that have API presence in their environments are generating revenue based on those APIs. So I think that, increasingly we have to think about that dollar value. In the past, I think, APIs were kind of considered, oh, it's behind the scenes, it's infrastructure, it's just how one set of software talks to another set of software. But realistically, the softwares that are talking to each other are often payment systems, are often systems that handle sensitive data. And I think that that dollar value association is getting stronger, for a lot of folks. Ellen, any quick thoughts to add there?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that and you see that kind of, percentile, I mean, I think it was what, 67%. I mean, what we
Yeah.
got to remember here too, I mean, Celeste, you brought up a great point, is that, I mean, with these API driven attacks, I mean, the risk here is so critical because, I mean, this is the primary attack surface for most of our modern applications. I mean, what do we use now that doesn't have an API that you can link somewhere in order to either push pull data or I mean run logic queries or anything like that. I mean it goes back to I mean, and I'm a gearhead. I mean, so I try to do things in cars, right? I mean, if you have tires on a car and one of your tires is flat, the car will still run. You put sugar in the gas tank, you have a different problem altogether. I mean, and I think that that's where we are here is that, I mean, you see these as high or critical API vulnerability. The vulnerabilities are high because, I mean, the threat to a business, if, some of these APIs go down, I mean, you brought it up, payments, everything else, I mean, is really high too. I mean, so I mean, that's where you're going to see all of this stuff, I mean, kind of come to a head.
Definitely. Something that we wanted to chat about from Gartner here is, this year, they're seeing more than 80% of enterprises are going to be using generative AI APIs or have deployed Gen AI enabled applications. So we don't need to dive super deep into this one, but it's just something that I wanted to bring to the folks on the call is the prevalence of this as well. That it's not only business critical, but it's incredibly prevalent for, folks out there in the industry. With that, we're going to jump to our third poll or our second poll question here. We've talked a lot about the importance of this, but in advance of our next couple of questions, I'd love to touch base on who currently owns AI and API related security within the organization. While we wait for answers to come in on the org, if you don't mind sharing, AJ and Ellen, who is doing that ownership in, within the orgs that you're working in currently?
Well, I mean, for mine, I mean, it's I mean, security has done it in the past, but my opinion is it should be shared. It's a development lift in order to use, APIs in an AI related environment. And it's a security control in order to make sure that, the APIs that you do use are securely coded and the tokenization is right and all that kind of stuff. So, for me personally, if it was a perfect world, it would be a shared responsibility equally between security and between development. But we don't always live in that perfect world. So I think that more often than not, you see a development team take the front end risk for that. But at the end of the day, your CISO, CTO, is ultimately going to be the person responsible. And on the back end, you're going to see the security team come in if there's, any kind of issues or problems, and see if they can, kind of nip that in the bud.
AJ, do you also see that shared responsibility model? Is that, or is it something that's more or less clearly defined?
Sure. So with our customers, we see different teams expressing different types of concern. So
Yeah.
we see legal and compliance teams reaching out with some, questions regarding AI security policy and compliance, what can be done with outputs, limitations of liability, things like that. We have engineering teams asking questions, certainly about, secure code, secure coding development, whereas security teams tend to ask more questions about observability and monitoring. So I'd say every team is asking a different set of questions, but a lot of the customers we work with are relatively large, mature, Fortune 500, often regulated. So outside of the regulated industries, there's certainly more variability.
I think that's reflected in our results here. We had a very close to 50-50 tie on folks who said engineering and platform teams and folks who said security teams. So, maybe that's just another way around to looking at this as a shared responsibility. With that, I think that we want to talk a little bit about what questions should security leaders, or, we talked about the IT team as well, the CTO or the CIO. What questions should folks be asking right now of those various teams that are trying to figure out this ownership within the organization, that maybe they aren't? I think AJ, you and I have chatted in the past a little bit about the why behind things, and would love to hear from you on that again here.
Sure. So, in terms of what security leaders should be asking now, I would say, how can I do the basics better? And where can I automate them? Because once you have strong basics that are repeatable and automated and quantifiable, then you move into continuous monitoring and then you can focus on other stuff. And for most of us that have worked in mature enterprises, we have tech debt. We have that funky old server from 2000, I don't want to say, that runs, some of our most important applications, and we just need that thing to stay running. Okay, so let's take this opportunity, put some more compensating controls around things like that. The key here is making sure the basics are done super well. Because if you can't see what your APIs are doing that a person coded, how do you expect to have that agility and visibility to see APIs that agents are spinning up and creating with their new autonomy? If you can't see what your agents do, it's not a security program, it's hope. But in order to get to that point, in order to do more with less, you have to find a way to simplify things, streamline, automate, and then that way you can take more strategic looks at your environment to figure out what you're missing and how to close those gaps.
Beautiful. Alan, I know we were just chatting right before this session, and you brought up, I think, something that's really important, which is business impact versus security impact. Is that something that you could share on the call now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that these are questions that, executives and boards, we really need to be focused on here is that, what's the business impact of, the LLM or the generative AI that we're trying to bring into our environment, and, how then our security leaders need to come in and our development teams need to come in and say, okay, well, how are we going to put controls into place to make sure that, it's, our risk is mitigated. And from a development perspective, how are we going to code this in order to make sure that, we are taking all of the, necessary precautions and stuff like that. We have the ability to, log and everything else. Because if you think about it, the business's responsibility is to, bring efficiencies to, their talent, so that way we can save money. But if we don't do just general basic hygiene items to make sure that these systems are secure, then, not only are we doing the organization a disservice, but we're doing the exact opposite of what they expect. They expect us to be able to save money. And if we don't do those things, then, a lack of oversight or faulty code or bad practices can put us severely in a situation where we're spending more money than we were hoping to save.
Yeah, those savings absolutely go away if the security isn't there. Something that I think I'm seeing a lot of right now is the speed of implementation around AI is really being driven by this disruptive sense of it in the industry. As with many disruptive technologies, there's this race to, we've got to be first to implement, we've got to implement. And I think something both of you talked about is looking at the why behind implementing AI. What are we trying to really get out of this? Is it, like you said, Alan, efficiencies to help our devs build faster? We see it across every org within companies. Is it helping, marketing folks to get better data or generate, quicker content? What is the actual goal behind making that adoption? Because I think when we're adopting AI just for the sake of saying we adopted it, that's when we so quickly run into those issues where security is not the top of mind piece. So thank you for sharing that. I'll move us through our next few slides pretty quickly here, just so we can get some time in for Q&A. But the last thing that we're looking at here is, what does good look like? For companies who are out there doing this in a way that you would say, whether it's your clients, at Oracle, or it's, companies that you've worked with in the past, Alan, or now, what does good look like? How can folks on the call get a vision of, oh, if we were doing this well, it would look like this?
Well, I think in a perfect world, it's being able to balance, the efficiencies of your AI or LLM platform with the um, protections that API security can offer you. I think that at the end of the day, if you talk to any kind of security professionals, they're going to say, hey, we want visibility into this, so that way if we have problems, we can see it, potentially do code roles or something like that. Being able to use a CASB platform, or being able to use, the specific tools that Wallarm has at our disposal in order to, kind of get some visibility into, how the sausage is made. And that helps us all the way around. And it allows the security people to have good conversations with, their technical talent. It allows the C-suites in an executive fashion to be able to talk to the board, or to, their other leaders about, how we want to do this and where we should do this. And I think that that's something that we also need to look at as well. Is that, it may look good now. AI, just a couple of years ago, it was not obviously where it is now. It's a lot more mature. We saw, a lot of issues with AI and API security, and we're still seeing some of those things. But as something moves forward, it gets more mature. The compensating controls that we have in place, become more foundational. It's a
Mhm.
walk, crawl, run kind of situation. And I think that that's kind of where people need to be right now, is to understand, hey, is this actually something that we need to do? Are we taking and giving AI, efficiencies that take away our code teams? Because we see that now too, right? Is that people are trying to save money at every turn. So they're turning to AI, to do the work of some of our development teams. And
Yeah.
I mean, in those kind of situations, I mean, are we really doing the right thing by, I mean, giving, the AI constructs the ability to self-regulate themselves? I mean, to me, that just kind of seems like that gets into another question of what kind of regulations are we going to put into place in order to make sure that, I mean, we are handling that in the right way. And I think that that kind of balloons out into a whole scary situation that we just really haven't gotten into yet.
Definitely. AJ, any last thoughts on what good looks like to you?
Sure, sure. Well, I don't want to revisit the things I've already said about hygiene and that stuff, and I'm sure people are looking for something a little bit more concrete. So I would say if you want to evaluate what good looks like for AI security at the API layer, you have to start with a few specific things. One of them would be IAM. You need separate user delegated access from machine to machine access, and that's absolutely fundamental. Um, then from there, you need to think about capability minimization. What capabilities are you providing these AI tools with? You want to avoid open-ended tools. You want to scope network access and environmental variables and repositories that they can access. Think about building guardrails. Think about what attributes you can assign these things that require some amount of trust and how you can remove the risk of that trust being violated. So put as many guardrails on these capabilities as you can, because ultimately you want to be able to enjoy the benefits they provide your business. So IAM is absolutely critical, not just from a provisioning and visibility standpoint, but also from deprovisioning. When things go wrong, and things will, and that's just the natural way of things, but you want to be able to stop these agents from doing the wrong thing. So IAM being able to see what's going on and revoke that access is absolutely critical. And the capability minimization practice, not only does it prevent several of the things that could go wrong in the first place, but it's also a great way to reinstill that human machine connection. We want to understand what these things are doing, and if we're not meaningfully evaluating the capabilities that we're giving them, then we fundamentally don't understand the technologies that we're building, all the great things they can, should, and shouldn't do for us, and how we can ultimately control them.
Thank you. We're going to take our last poll question here. I'll just say a few words about, I think the wall arm ethos around this as we get answers in. The question here is how much of a priority is securing AI-driven APIs to your organization in the next few months? Is this a top priority where there's active investment? Or is this something where it's on the roadmap, but we're not, quite sure where we're at yet? Give folks a few minutes to answer that. But while we do, things that I think Wallarm, the way we think about this, what good looks like, and how to make these investments, is really across a framework of discovery, right? We talked a lot about the importance of the visibility. But then also protection, right? The ability to not only see what's going on in the environment, but to actively, block attacks. I think, Alan, you mentioned several times that, and AJ as well, the testing portion of this. How are we going to test what we're building, not just in our dev environments, but in production? And then ultimately, I think we look a lot at governance as well, which is the piece of it that you guys have spoken about in the latter half of this webinar, which is that, executive level narrative, and the ability to see risk over time. So I think that's, definitely the way that we view it. And I think that's why obviously, of course, we think it should be a top priority for folks. But would love to just hear from folks on the call. It does look like we have all our answers in, and our winner on this one with about 53 or with about 50% was important, but not a top focus yet. So we can see the sort of if we have quartiles here, this third quartile being important. So I'm going to drop us into Q&A real quick. We have just a few minutes left for that. And if you haven't had a chance to, put that question into the chat yet, or into the Q&A function on Zoom, please do so now. I see a couple questions there. And we'll if we don't get to your call active your question actively on the call, we'll definitely try to follow up with you after the event. So this first one is around regulations and industry standards. So there's kind of two parts to this question. Do we expect regulators to continue to play a larger role? And then, or is this something that organizations are going to have to figure out on their own? And then the follow-up on this from the same person was any thoughts that you have on the EU AI Act with the August deadline coming up this year. So a little bit of focus on that governance regulation piece. Anything that you're doing to help your clients prepare, AJ?
Sure, sure. These are great questions. I think that there's going to be some very different global approaches. In the US, we love our private public partnerships. So probably a
Mhm.
lot of regulations that arise will largely be born from the industry, drafted by the industry, and put forth by the industry. In
Mhm.
Europe, we're likely to see a little bit of the opposite, more of the European governments expecting the tech companies to accommodate the European viewpoint, which makes sense. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how these two different key approaches play out. And those are the two markets I'm most familiar with. I'm sure
Yeah.
Asia and Africa are also going to have unique approaches that will be really interesting to see and learn from. And in terms of how are we helping customers prepare, we're not certain what they will be yet in terms of Oracle's side of the shared responsibility model. I'm sure that across the globe for every continent, there's Oracle personnel tracking the changes to be made and making sure that all of the things on Oracle's side of the responsibility model, whether it's IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, we're executing and then providing some tools to help our customers execute on their side of the model.
Excellent. Alan, I have a more, I think, dev-oriented, conversation, infrastructure-oriented conversation starter here for you. A question came in from Orlando. If AI agents are making API calls on their own, how do we put guardrails in place without breaking all the workflows that we just implemented in AI? And I think that comes back to you were speaking earlier about that dichotomy or the tension between guardrails and speed of innovation. So wanted to direct that one to you.
Right. I mean, and I think with those, I mean, you're going to look at third-party systems in order to do some of those kind of things. I mean, with some of that stuff, I mean, I mean, it's IAM tools, it's identity management, I mean, it's access control. I mean, the things that AJ brought up, I mean, just a couple minutes ago. I mean, environment variable control, I mean, is also a big part of that as well. I mean, but I mean, if it's a system to a system, I mean, I think that the best way in order to do that is to make sure that that information is all logged. And I mean, it's in, I mean, your SIM platform, or I mean, if you're using, Casby, or if you're using tools from Wallarm, I mean, those are the things that are going to give you the insights in order to make sure that you can um, programmatically take care of those problems. I mean, I don't think that it's, I mean, more of a mean, how do we code into that? I mean, if it's a system to system, I think it's more of, what kind of inherent access does system A have to get into system B? I mean, is there any way that, I mean, any of the, credential sharing, or like I said, like a prompt injection, could cause you problems there. And I think that I would look to third party tooling in order to help me out in those aspects.
Yeah. I think that, and it's such a deep ecosystem, right? There are, as you mentioned, so many different vendors across different parts of the space. When we say AI security, that's not a monolith. That's vendors who are managing, access and IAM. That's vendors like Wallarm that are managing, the API side. And of course, there's prompt injection, other security pieces to think about as well. Well, thank you guys both so much. Thank you all so much for joining. We are just a few minutes out past our time here, so I'll wrap us up. But we really appreciate the insights today. If I can sum up, this is a space that's still evolving, but the same principles that apply in other security spaces visibility, protection, governance, those still apply here. So thank you for sharing your insights on those, and we'll look forward to chatting with you again soon. And thanks very much for folks on the call. Yes, I am reminded here that we do have another webinar upcoming next month that is focused more specifically on web application firewall and AI. So today we talked a little bit about APIs and AI. Next month we'll be talking about some of the gaps that our customers are seeing between web application firewall and AI as well. So please do take that QR code to register, and we look forward to hoping to see many of you again next month. Thank you all.